Your 15 years here are over, she said like she was handing me a parking ticket instead of ending a career I'd built from the ground up. First day on the board, and this fresh out of some country club, Karen, named Barbara Thompson, was already swinging her clipboard like it was Excalibur. She didn't even sit down, just strutted into my home office in her starched HOA polo, pearls gleaming like tiny judgmental eyes, and dropped that line like it was a Sermon on the Mount. I stared at her for exactly 3 seconds. That was all it took to catalog everything. The overconfident posture, the wristwatch too shiny for someone who'd never balanced a single escrow account, and the fact her khakis still had the crease from the dry cleaner, meaning this woman hadn't earned one real day of sweat in Maple Grove Estates yet. So I smiled. Real calm, real sweet, the kind of smile that makes Karens think they've won. Good luck with next quarter's dues collection, I said softly. Now, if you're just tuning in, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button. 97% of you beautiful chaos lovers are watching without it, and I see you. No shade, but it keeps the coffee flowing and the HOA horror stories coming. Anyway, back to this pearl-clutching dictator in my living room. Barbara blinked like she expected tears or maybe a dramatic lawn chair protest. I gave her neither. Just stood up, gathered my coffee mug, the one that quietly said, HOA rules suck in tiny Comic Sans, and slid into my cardboard box with the grace of someone who'd survived 60-hour weeks for roof leak emergencies and one full-blown 2019 embezzlement scandal I'd quietly buried for the good of the community. Security will escort you out, she added, gesturing like I might steal a lawn gnome. Sure, I said, just as soon as I log out. I didn't, of course. Everything critical was already encrypted, auto-scheduled, and bound to my personal protocol. My calendar entries were pristine. My violation logs zipped and archived. The real beast, the custom HOA management system that handled dues, fines, vendor contracts, community portal, and predictive budgeting for 300 homes. Well, that was a different story. No slow claps from neighbors, no gasps. I wasn't trying to be a martyr. I just walked past the retired guy across the street who never looked up from his golf magazine. Past Susan from number 47 who mouthed, she's going to regret this, without blinking. Past the rosebush I'd nursed through 3 droughts and 1 illegal fence dispute. No exit interview. No farewell email blast. Just a polite nod at the neighborhood security guy. Actually just old Mr. Ramirez in a reflective vest, who looked more embarrassed than I was. I hit the sidewalk like a ghost slipping out of its own skin. 15 years. 15 years of late nights with cold takeout, budgets balanced on my sanity, and annual reviews that called me a quiet asset. Turns out quiet is just HOA speak for disposable. But disposable doesn't mean gone. Not when the entire system used to make 6-figure decisions on landscaping bids, pool repairs, and fine enforcement. Ran on scripts I wrote, databases I built, formulas I designed, stuff I never documented in any public Google Drive, not out of malice, just efficiency. They never asked how it worked. They only asked that it worked. So when Queen Barbara starts swinging her axe without checking the roots, well, let's just say I left more than my mud behind. I left them a ticking silence coded in rows and columns waiting to scream. And in 48 hours, that silence was going to roar louder than any leaf blower violation she'd ever issued. The badge clinked softly as I dropped it on the community mailbox. No speech, no drama, just a faint scent of fresh-cut grass and desperation lingering in the cul-de-sac like every resident who'd been fined into submission. Are you sure you don't want to stay on as a volunteer? The board secretary started, clearly rehearsed, clearly terrified. I cut her off with a look, not rude, just finished. She swiveled back to her laptop like she'd never seen me. Give her a year, I thought. She'll either grow a spine or learn to fake smiles with wine. I lifted the single cardboard box. No inspirational plaques about community spirit. No framed pictures of fake block party smiles. Just the mug, my wireless mouse, mine, not HOA issued, and a little origami crane someone folded during the great 2021 mailbox color war. It was stupid, and I loved it. As I passed number 12, I saw Greg lean out his garage. His eyes flicked from the box to my face, then to Barbara's McMansion down the street. He didn't say anything, but his mouth moved. Just a whisper, "She's gonna regret this." I didn't nod. I didn't blink. Just kept walking because Greg wasn't wrong. But he also didn't know how spectacularly wrong Barbara was about to be. Down the block, Mr. Ramirez didn't even stand up from his folding chair. He just tilted his head, looked at me for a long second, and said, "You good?" "Golden," I answered, shifting the box under one arm. The gate hissed open. Sunlight, sprinkler hiss, a woman 3 houses down yelling at her husband over a basketball hoop 2 inches too high. Life was still moving. No fireworks, no brass band. Just me walking away from a neighborhood I'd spent 15 years keeping afloat while Karens played musical chairs with other people's property values. But see, the thing they never understood, and none of them wanted to, was that those monthly reports they loved to flash at meetings like HOA pornography weren't just spreadsheets. They were a symphony. A beast built from conditional logic, violation scraping, fine prediction, and 5 different budgeting algorithms stitched together with digital duct tape and my personal paranoia. No one else asked how it worked. They just got their pretty violation notices and there were under-budget graphs and called it leadership. I watched Barbara's McMansion shrink in my rearview mirror, feeling nothing but calm. Not even bitter, just aware. The system was scheduled to self-lock in 48 hours if no valid biometric activity was detected. That wasn't sabotage. That was protocol. My protocol, put in place after the 2019 scandal to prevent stale data, force recalibration, and require my fingerprint plus 2-factor tied to my phone. And guess what? Barbara never asked for a handoff. Never requested admin elevation. She just printed a termination notice, flexed for the org chart, and went back to thinking she was God's gift to perfect lawns. So I drove home, cracked a soda, and opened my laptop. Not to check email. I'd already forwarded anything useful to my personal archive. No, I opened it to watch the logs. At 2:43 p.m., it attempted access to the core model. Result: access denied. 3 tries. Reboot trigger initiated. Estimated lockout countdown: 47 hours and 12 minutes. I smiled. Not because I wanted to watch them burn, but because I knew I didn't have to do a damn thing. They fired me thinking I was a cog. But I wasn't the cog. I was the engine. The thing about women like Barbara, the ones who mistake authority for competence, is they think a loud voice and a clipboard substitute for actual knowledge. By Monday, she was already booking the community center for Thursday's quarterly board review. Puffed up like she'd invented homeowners associations. She sent out a smug email. Expect streamlined insights in a modernized enforcement delivery. Let's raise the bar. Raise the bar, honey. You haven't even found the ladder. Meanwhile, deep in the server logs, the cracks were forming. It flagged the main compliance model twice, once Sunday night, again Monday morning, with vague alerts like unexpected formula behavior and credential mismatch. They opened a ticket, escalated to the tech-savvy neighbor who once fixed his own Wi-Fi. He closed it with no comment. Too busy updating the violation templates and Googling synonyms for synergy, I imagine. From my kitchen counter, coffee in hand, I watched the internal HOA group chat trickle into the cloud backup I'd configured years ago for safety. Not spying, just preventative retention. The alerts were dry, but I could hear the panic buried underneath. On Tuesday, Barbara called a quick sync with the finance committee to review data trends. Except the trends weren't trending. They weren't even loading. The community portal flickered, gave her a static bar chart from 2 quarters ago, then crashed. A junior board member, bless her terrified soul, raised her hand and said, the formulas seem off. Barbara waved her off with the kind of grin people use to hide the sound of an internal engine fire. Probably just a permissions thing. We've had a lot of legacy stuff floating around. I'll streamline it. Legacy stuff. That's what she called the thing keeping the neighborhood from screaming. Every month, that system took raw dues data, violation metrics, contractor volatility, and 3 decades of resident behavior, and turned it into something the board could digest in 5 bullet points and a pie chart. It didn't just exist, it learned. Now it was locked. Wednesday morning, she copied and pasted a half-baked projection from an old presentation and dropped it into a new deck like nobody would notice. She tried again to ping the portal. Another wall of access denied and a helpful little subline I'd added after the embezzlement scare. Contact authorized architect for recalibration protocol. There were only ever 2 authorized architects. One retired in 2020. The other was currently baking banana bread and humming to Fleetwood Mac in her pajamas. Barbara still hadn't called. Still hadn't even acknowledged anything publicly. But in the HOA WhatsApp group, whispers were starting. A landscaping rep DM'd someone on the board. Why does the main model say her name on it? Another thread lit up. Anyone know how to update the violation schedule? Getting weird errors. The answers came back vague, confused, nervous. No one dared say it aloud yet. But the thing they were all leaning on wasn't leaning back. And I sat there watching the countdown clock tick closer to 0, feeling something that wasn't quite joy, but sure as hell wasn't regret. Thursday, 7:42 a.m. In the community center, where the walls were beige, but the egos rarely were, Barbara was trying to open the compliance model for a final pre-meeting review. Her assistant had already placed the tablet in front of her, the projector humming gently, waiting to display months of future-proofed financial clarity to the gods of the board. She tapped, waited, tapped again. The screen went black, then red text bloomed across the center. Loud and unapologetic, access denied. Authorized user redacted. Credencial signature. And just like that, the room's temperature dropped 10 degrees. She muttered something under her breath. Probably a curse, possibly a prayer, then jabbed the screen like it owed her HOA dues. The assistant blinked. Is that supposed to happen? Barbara stood up fast. Too fast. Chair clattered behind her. Get fixed. Now. Meanwhile, 6 houses away, the tech-savvy neighbor had already seen the lockout attempts. Hell, he'd seen 6 of them. 3 from Barbara, 2 from the finance leads, and 1 from Susan, who thought refreshing the portal would magically fix everything. Spoiler, it didn't. He typed a command, waited, and said, no dice. Encryption is ironclad. We can't bypass it without a full wipe. A wipe? Asked one of the suits who'd wandered in, clearly hoping someone would just unplug and replug the neighborhood. The neighbor nodded. Yeah, we'd lose 12 years of historical violation behavior. Macro logic. Basically everything that makes this more than just a spreadsheet. Back at the center, Barbara took a long, deep breath and smiled through it like she was still in control of the steering wheel despite the car now being on fire and headed for a cliff. It's a minor glitch, she told the early arrivals. Just some outdated permissions. Happens all the time in legacy systems. Legacy, there was that word again, like it was my middle name and not her lifeline. She started flipping through a backup presentation built on guesswork, gut feeling, and sheer ego, all while trying to casually mute her phone every time it pinged with another failed override attempt. And me? I was sitting on my porch sipping my second coffee of the morning and watching my neighbor try to parallel park for the 4th time. Laptop open, VPN active, log streaming in. Each failed login attempt pinged like a polite little doorbell from across the subdivision. 7:42 a.m. Unauthorized credential. 7:43 a.m. Multi-factor validation failure. 7:45 a.m. Admin override blocked. Biometric mismatch. The best part? Each rejection logged the device ID and attached a delightful time-stamped header. Escalation path EM. Only they could see my name. Stamped clean across the denial notice like a digital middle finger in Helvetica. I took a bite of toast, chuckled, and watched the birds fight over a bagel someone dropped on the sidewalk. Chaos outside, chaos inside. Perfect harmony. Back at the community center, someone finally dared to ask who built this thing again. Silence. Barbara clenched her jaw. We're handling it. Handling it. Sure. She hadn't called. Still hadn't reached out. still spinning her narrative like the problem was the software, not the fact that the woman who designed it now had a front row seat to her unraveling. And the quarterly meeting less than 90 minutes away. TikTok. Enjoy the show. 9:02 a.m. The community center smelled like cheap coffee, nervous sweat, and the kind of desperation you only see when Karens realize their perfect little kingdom might not be multiplying on schedule. The meeting had officially started. The muffins were untouched, and the screen behind Barbara still screamed access denied. Autorized usering. The same two red lines have been blinking for 34 minutes. Where are the projections? Asked Mr. Franklin, one of the older board members with a voice like he'd been drinking gravel since the 80s. We're sitting on 3 pending pool repairs and a lawsuit from the Johnsons about their flagpole. I need those numbers. Barbara, slick with performance anxiety, but trying to hold composure like a rented tuxedo, forced a chuckle. Minor hiccup. We're experiencing some short-term tech issues with our legacy enforcement tools. I'll walk you through some provisional data I've compiled. She clicked to the next slide. A Frankenstein bar chart that looked like it had been built in PowerPoint by a caffeinated raccoon. This isn't the model, said someone else flatly. It wasn't a question. No, she admitted. We got our team working on it. The actual file? Well, it's temporarily inaccessible. Why does it say her name? Asked a venture-minded resident dialing in from his golf cart. He zoomed in on the shared screen like he was reading an arrest warrant. Emily Morgan. Silence. Barbara swallowed. She built the original system. I've been in the process of untangling some outdated security protocols. Outdated? That's cute. From my kitchen, I stir my oatmeal and logged into the shadow node, still pinging override attempts every 6 minutes like a metronome for HOA failure. I clicked into Barbara's phone activity log. She had just called Linda from landscaping, then Greg in maintenance, then even Pam in accounting, mid-level busybody after mid-level busybody, fishing discreetly. Hey, do you have her number? Have you heard from Emily? Could you maybe check in on how she's doing? Texts were even worse. Hi, hope you're well. Quick thing, any chance you can reconnect us with Emily? She might have some helpful insight. One guy even sent. We'd really appreciate her input. Just until we're through this bottleneck. Totally informal bottleneck. That's what they were calling it. Meanwhile, I was polishing off my oatmeal and starting a jigsaw puzzle I'd been putting off since 2021. No ruse. Let them sweat. Back in the community center, the board president's face had gone tight. That signature expression where you can tell he's doing mental math between damage control and finger pointing. So you're telling us, he said, leaning forward, that our entire predictive compliance system, which informs our dues collection, violation enforcement, pool repairs, hiring decisions for landscapers, and Q4 budget alignment, is currently inaccessible because the only person who could access it was removed without a transition plan. Barbara hesitated. It was an oversight, and she hasn't been contacted? Another hesitation. I thought it best not to escalate without a protocol. One board member muttered, "We are the protocol." Phone started vibrating. Whispers erupted like popcorn. Get her on the line. Do we even have her number? Did legal sign off on her removal? Why wasn't this flagged before the meeting? Barbara stood there jaw tight, hands folded like a priest asking God to reschedule Judgment Day. And me? I was sitting cross-legged on the floor in my pajamas, putting together the corner pieces of a seascape puzzle and letting my phone vibrate silently across the counter because I wasn't ignoring them out of spite. I was ignoring them out of design. Control isn't loud. It's quiet, invisible like a lever. No one notices until you take your hand off it and the machine stops turning. And the machine was very much stopped. By 10:37 a.m., the board president had heard enough whispers to start a storm. He'd spent the last hour sitting stone still at the head of the table, watching Barbara spin a second-rate circus of half-slides, recycled talking points, and buzzwords duct-taped to speculation. But the moment his phone buzzed with a message from the community attorney, subject line, "No documentation found, system ownership," the president stood up without a word and walked out of the room. The board followed with their eyes. A few exchanged looks. One leaned to another and whispered, "She fired the wrong person." That phrase would echo like a funeral bell down the cul-de-sac for days. In his home office, the president didn't pace, didn't shout. He just stared out the window with his jaw tight, watching a landscaping crew moat decorative lines while the neighborhood's own compliance infrastructure lay 6 feet under. He called a tech neighbor. "Tell me exactly who has access to the HOA system." A pause. Then the neighbor's voice, strained but precise. "Only one user profile is authorized to unlock or recalibrate the predictive engine. All other accounts are view-only or dependent on admin shadowing, and that user is Emily Morgan. Her profile is still listed as primary architect. Fingerprint encrypted, two-factor tied to her personal keychain. No backups, no secondary. We tried a sandboxed override," the neighbor added. "It bricked the simulation model and flagged a corruption warning, so we can't even fake the reports." The president asked, "No, sir. We'd be running blind." He ended the call, sat down slowly, and stared at the phone like it might grow legs and walk away to avoid blame. He pulled up my old resident file. The last note, quiet, reliable, systems-minded, tends to hoard responsibilities, recommend delegation training. Below it, Barbara's removal signature, time-stamped 4 days ago. He hit the internal line. "Give me your number." Personally. Meanwhile, I was painting my toenails, not for vanity, for peace. The sun was warm through the living room windows. My inbox had started to quietly buzz with texts from old neighbors who'd suddenly remembered I existed. Subject lines like, "Hope you're well." "Quick cue. Thinking of you. Do you have a sec?" Greg even sent a gif of a dumpster fire with the caption, "Guess what they're watching in the community center today?" I laughed out loud. Then I logged into the node, checked the access logs again. Nothing had changed. Same failed attempts, same red locks. But now the metadata had a new entry. Query flagged, user dependency structure accessed by president. There it is, I thought. He finally looked under the hood. Because for 15 years, no one wanted to know how the sausage got made. They just wanted clean lawns, paid dues, and violation notices with polite curves. But now that the chef was gone and the kitchen was burning, now they were interested. And I knew my value had never been higher. I could hear the questions piling up like overdue fines on a broken printer tray. Why didn't we clone her access? Why was there no disaster recovery protocol? Who approved her removal without a knowledge transfer? Answers were simple, because I did everything and no one ever asked how. Now they needed me. Not as Emily from number 28, but as the keystone holding up the whole damn subdivision. My phone lit up. Private number. I smiled and let it ring twice. Then 3 times, bargaining power peaks in the silence before the call, is answered. It was just after 8 p.m. The kind of quiet that hums with a dishwasher sloshing and wind brushing the curtains. I was halfway through a glass of wine, feet up, blanket over my lap when the phone rang. No caller ID. Just that sterile gray glow of a blocked number that only ever means one of 2 things: spam or someone finally swallowing their pride. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I answered. A pause, breathing. Then Emily. The voice was low, controlled, tired in a way that said too many hours, too many egos, and one very big mistake. It was the board president. "I know this isn't protocol," he said. "But protocol isn't working right now. No kidding. The board is still here. They've been waiting, and the only thing we can pull up from the system," he exhaled, "is your name in red with 2 words underneath. Access denied." He paused again. "Explain." I didn't answer right away. I looked out the window. A neighbor was walking their dog. The street lamp made the sidewalk glow like an old postcard. Then I said calmly, "That depends. Do you want a short-term fix or a permanent solution?" He was quiet, not the defensive kind of quiet, the calculating kind. The kind where you can hear the exact second someone realizes they're not holding the reins anymore. "I'm listening." I took a sip of wine. Let the silence stretch again. Not to be petty, not to be cruel, just to give gravity the space it needed. Your new president made a call without due diligence. You trusted her to streamline what she didn't understand. And now your community is flying blind into Q4 with 3 pending repairs, unpaid, dues stacking up, and no verified financial trajectory. More silence. This one had weight behind it. Emily, he said finally, just tell me what it takes. There it was, the shift from command to request. I stood up, walked to the window, and watched the dog sniffing at a storm drain. The night was quiet, but I could feel the heat of 20 boardroom eyes in another part of the subdivision waiting on my voice like it was oxygen. No more under-the-table nonsense, I said. No intermediaries, no discreet outreach. You want this fixed? We do it right. Official, documented, and clean. And, he asked, I'll need full reinstatement. Same title, same system authority. But this time I report directly to you. No Barbara in my chain of command. No interference. He didn't argue. And compensation. I smiled. We'll discuss a performance clause. One that reflects my actual value. Not just what the HOA thinks the market says I'm worth. A pause, then surprisingly a soft chuckle. Fair enough. I could hear chairs scraping in the background. People murmuring. Maybe someone reading lips. Maybe someone realizing for the first time that the most powerful person in the neighborhood wasn't even in the building. Emily, he said again, quieter now. Thank you for taking the call. I didn't do it for you. And I hung up, calm, still barefoot, still holding the wine because sometimes power doesn't roar. Sometimes it sips Cabernet and lets the world come knocking. The next morning I didn't rush. No triumphantstrat. No dramatic heels echoing off sidewalks. Just slacks, a dark sweater, and a calm walk through the community gate like I'd never left. Because in the ways that mattered, I hadn't. The gate attendant froze when she saw me, eyes wide like a ghost had wandered in for a meeting. Is someone expecting you? I gave her a kind smile. There now. The walk to the community center was quiet, just me and the hum of suburban tension tightening by the second. The door opened like a wound. The hallway buzzed with whispers, phones to ears, board members moving like they were dodging sniper fire. When I stepped into the meeting room, the energy snapped like an overstretched rubber band. Barbara was already seated at the far end of the table, pale as printer paper, hands clenched around a legal pad she hadn't written a damn thing on. Her jaw twitched when she saw me. No greeting, just avoidance, like eye contact might trigger a stroke. The president stood. Thank you for coming. I nodded, set down my laptop, and clicked it open without fanfare. A projector hummed to life behind me, screen bathing the room in a clean, pale glow. I won't waste your time, I said, voice steady, clear. You're here because the compliance system failed to load. It didn't crash. It wasn't a bug. It did exactly what it was designed to do. Click. A diagram appeared, complex, layered, but readable. Like the inner workings of a safe. This system isn't just a spreadsheet. It's a living architecture of predictive enforcement. It ingests 12 categories of dynamic inputs across 5 committees, weights them against historical behavior, and adjusts based on external factors pulled from 3 real-time APIs. Click. I pointed to a red square. This is the security protocol built after the 2019 breach, where someone tried to falsify violation logs to inflate contractor bonuses. Boardroom murmurs. I was asked to ensure it wouldn't happen again, so I did. That protocol encrypts the core logic and binds it to biometric credentials. Mine, because I was the only one trained to recalibrate it without risk of data contamination. The room was silent. No coughs, no pen clicks, just the gentle hum of an empire realizing its heartbeat came from someone they let walk out with a cardboard box. Click. I pulled up the audit log. 17 failed access attempts, timestamps, device IDs, and the final red banner they all saw yesterday morning. Access denied. Authorized architect EM. Then I turned to face them. I didn't lock you out. You did that when you removed me without a handoff, without credential transition, and without so much as a knowledge capture session. This wasn't sabotage. It was negligence. Someone near the center of the table said, low and sharp, who authorized a removal? All heads swiveled. Barbara looked like she was melting. She started, voice dry as chalk. It was a standard restructuring. I was told to streamline. No, you weren't, the president said, voice suddenly sharp. That was never authorized at the board level. You didn't even brief me. Another board member leaned forward. So you cut the architect of our entire compliance infrastructure to streamline? Barbara tried to shift the blame like she was passing a hot potato with no hands. She never documented her system clearly. She held on to access. I cut her off calmly. There were 2 internal requests in the last 5 years to document the full architecture. Both times I offered to train a successor. Both times the request was dropped for more urgent priorities. I have emails. Click inbox receipts, timestamp chain of command. All of it. No one defended her. The president finally broke the silence. This is done. Barbara's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like she'd forgotten how to breathe without authority. She didn't speak. She just stood, gathered her untouched pad, and walked out under the fluorescent lights like a woman realizing the fall doesn't kill you. The landing does. I turned back to the table. Shall we talk about restoring access? And every single head nodded. Barbara didn't even make it out of the hallway. Before the board could move on, the president stepped to the door and called after her, voice sharp as broken glass. Actually, Barbara, one more thing. The whole room went still. Barbara turned, already wilting, her polo suddenly too big for the woman inside it. You're done, the president said, voice even but final. Effective immediately. No theatrics, no shouting, just the cold suburban bullet to the brain. Barbara blinked, lips parting like she might argue, but then she saw the community attorney already walking into the room with a beige envelope and a paperclip folder. The board didn't flinch. No protests, no sympathy. She left with nothing but the faint squeak of her loafers against the tile and a silence so thick it might have had mass. The president closed the door and turned to me. I believe we owe you a proper conversation. I nodded, laptop still open, cursor blinking like it was waiting for permission. We'd like to offer reinstatement, he said. Senior role, title of your choosing. Significant compensation increase. A board member chimed in. And no Barbara in your way. Direct reporting line to the president. Another added, whatever resources you need to document, train, or scale the system, you get them. No questions asked. I looked around the table. The same people who once called me quiet, reliable, low maintenance. The ones who used to skim past my reports to get to the prettier charts. Now, they weren't just looking at me. They were waiting. I clicked a few keys. The projector screen flickered, then filled with soft, familiar blue. The dashboard loaded seamlessly. Charts bloomed like spring after frost. Dues arcs, violation curves, expense deltas, all where they should be alive, accurate, awake. The board exhaled in unison like a single organism. And I, still calm, still steady, closed my laptop with a soft click and walked to the empty seat at the head of the table. My seat now. I placed the laptop in front of me, smoothed the crease on my sleeve, looked around at the most powerful people in the subdivision, all staring like I just raised the Titanic, and smiled. Let's get those quarterly reports done, shall we? No cheers, no applause, just heads nodding. Respect earned, not gifted. And inside, not gloating, not raging, just that deep, quiet satisfaction of everything falling exactly into place. They had tried to erase me. Now I was the only name that mattered. Thanks for watching, you suburban warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old HOA president, then you're on your own. And if you're dealing with your own Karen right now, drop your story in the comments. I read every single one, because somewhere out there, another quiet resident is sitting on their porch with a locked system and a smile, waiting for the countdown to hit 0. But let's rewind just a little so you can savor the full delicious collapse. After Barbara's dramatic exit, the board wasted no time. Within 48 hours, the new agreement was signed, my direct line to the president, a 25% bump in the stipend, and full authority to finally train 2 successors on my terms, with actual documentation this time. The system woke up like it had never been asleep. Dues started flowing again. Violation notices popped up exactly where they belonged. The Johnsons got their flagpole approval retroactively. The pool repair bids went out on time, and, best of all, the dandelions that had started sprouting everywhere because nobody could issue fines suddenly got handled with surgical precision. Residents who'd been secretly cheering from behind their curtains started sending me casseroles and passive-aggressive thank you cards that basically read, "We always knew she was crazy." Barbara, of course, didn't go quietly into that good night. She tried one last power play, posted a long Facebook rant in the private neighborhood group about legacy systems and unprofessional conduct and how she was only trying to modernize for the children. The comments were brutal. Susan from 47 replied with a single gif of a dumpster fire. Greg posted the audit log screenshot, anonymously, of course, showing 17 failed attempts, all time-stamped from her phone. Even the kids in the cul-de-sac started chanting access denied when her golf cart drove by. Property values? They dipped for exactly 1 week while the system was down, long enough for the realtors to whisper and the Karens to clutch pearls, then shot back up the moment the dashboard glowed blue again. Turns out people like living in a neighborhood that actually functions. Who knew? I kept my promise to the president. No public gloating, no revenge tours. But every quarterly meeting I made sure to open with the same slide, the one that quietly listed primary architect, Emily Morgan, right at the top in soft blue. Just a gentle reminder that some systems can't be streamlined by someone whose only qualification is a loud voice and a clipboard. And every time Barbara's name came up in passing, maybe someone spotted her shopping at the big box store 3 towns over, still wearing that same polo like a defeated uniform, I'd allow myself one small, private smile. Not because I wanted her to suffer forever, just because I knew the next time someone tried to fire the quiet woman who actually kept the lights on, they'd think twice. The best part? The ridiculous rules she loved so much started working against her in the most poetic way. Remember the 3-inch grass rule? The one she enforced with religious zeal? Well, while the system was locked, half the lawns in Maple Grove grew past 6 inches. When I flipped the switch back on, the automated violation engine fired off 200 notices in one night. Half of them to homes Barbara had personally exempted because their owners were her friends. Suddenly, her own front yard got flagged for aesthetic noncompliance. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. She tried to appeal, of course. Sent a 3-page email citing extenuating circumstances. I denied it personally, politely, professionally, with a smiley face emoji at the end just to twist the knife. For the good of the community, of course. Months later, when the annual block party rolled around, I stood at the grill flipping burgers while neighbors clapped me on the back and asked how I'd done it. I just shrugged and said, I built it to last. But inside I was replaying that perfect moment in the community center when the red text bloomed across the screen and Barbara's face went the exact color of an overdue fine notice. That moment when every single person in the room realized the emperor had no clothes and the quiet treasurer had been holding the scissors the whole time. So if you're watching this and you live in an HOA run by a Barbara, remember, stay calm, stay quiet, stay dangerous. Document everything. Build your own little protocol if you have to. And when they come for you with their clipboards and their pearls, smile. Because somewhere in the code, a countdown is already running. And when it hits 0, the silence. It screams. Now to go check your own lawn. Make sure it's under 3 inches. You never know who's watching.